Sales of Eli Lilly's blockbuster drug Zepbound came in higher than expected, prompting the company to raise its full-year sales guidance, while Novo Nordisk slashing its profit outlook after Wegovy sales fell short of expectations. We're going to take a look at how to best play the surging demand in GLP-1s in our Yahoo Finance playbook, with more on how to play the GLP-1 hype. Maurits, Tema ETFs founder and CEO, joins us now. Maurits, good to see you.
Good to see you. Thanks for having me on the show today.
So we were talking off camera, Maurits, about how a lot of times I think people, they think about GLP-1s, the trend, and investors excited about it. They often frame it as like there's just these two giants. There's Lilly and there's Novo, right? Maurits, you say it's not that simple. There's others. We should broaden the horizon a bit.
That's a great question. So the industry today is defined by two horses, little horses you mentioned, Lilly and Novo. But we think actually over time this is going to be a 4 to 6 horse race. Because right now, you only have one device, which is injectable, going after one treatment, which is weight loss. But in reality, we're seeing innovation in parts of the market. We're looking at people looking at oral instead of injectable. People are looking at applications beyond weight loss. Could it be used in Alzheimer's? Could it be used in sleep anemia? Could it be used in oncological disorders, in heart disease? And then also you're looking at how can you make the patient experience better to reduce side effects, to reduce frequency of dosage, to ultimately increase the continuation rate after 12 months. A challenge today is one, the affordability, but two, also the accessibility. There's a big drop-off after 6 to 12 months. How do you ensure that people stay on the drugs for longer?
And so how do you do that? And then how do you invest in that idea?
Yeah, so Rati, these are big CapEx cycles with big R&D budgets. I mean, Eli Lilly today mentioned that it took them 8 years for tirzepatide to basically get approved to where it is today. They first got their stage 1 approval in 2016. That kind of gives you an idea. This is an 8-year journey. So we think, again, that there is a number of competitors, but you need big balance sheets. You need to obviously have like the ability to actually run the trials and to actually like develop and iterate on the trials. And this is not going to be straightforward. So we've seen Eli Lilly now moving with their Chugai oral drug into phase 2. Eli Lilly is also progressing another oral drug outside of what they're doing with Chugai. We're seeing Viking moving an oral drug into phase 3 last month. So there's a number of players that are in the space. You've seen also the readout from Roche last month on their Carmot asset, which they bought last year in Q4. So there's a number of people in the space. In reality, there's only 2 drugs approved today in the US. We think it's not going to be a question of this year, maybe of next year before we see more drugs approved, but we do see more innovation beyond just weight loss and beyond just injectables.
And 2 other names in your product, your ETF, more. So I mean, obviously besides Lilly Novo, you've got Alnylam and Amgen. Yeah. Why are those 2 in there?
So we think Amgen is very interesting, working on a lower frequency of dosage approach. And Alnylam is taking a more genetics approach, which again is unproven, but the early data is pretty promising. And looking at the way you could use genetics to actually treat or to address the underlying obesity issue is a challenge that not many people are focused on. But obviously, if there's clear data there, that'd be very promising. So we really try and invest in both the established leaders of today, which is Lilly and Novo, but also thinking out who could be the 3rd, 4th, 6th horse in this race, given that we strongly believe this is not going to be a 2-horse race over time.
I'm also interested to see in the ETF 2 names that have been hurt by all of this. I'm talking about Dexcom and Insulet, which are more diabetes providers here, because the thinking was if fewer people are suffering from diabetes because they're taking these drugs, they won't need those products. So how do they fit in?
So the reality is the direct inference is that that if people there's less obese people, then there would be less demand for these medical devices. But the reality, the medical devices also treat other ailments, and there's also second order effects from basically taking weight loss drugs. For example, one being muscle loss. So we think that actually, while the contrarian view is to own Dexcom and Edwards, especially after the drop of the past month, we actually think they're quite attractively priced. Because the concern with some of the GLP-1 players is the valuations. And that's not a concern we see. So we think actually the runway for Dexcom and Edwards will change with GLP-1, but it's actually still very interesting, especially these valuations.
I'm curious, Maurits, when you and your team think about just the GLP-1 market broadly, how big is that market?
So today, the biggest estimates from Goldman are about $130 billion a year by 2030. We think this could be $500 billion market. Why? How do you get
there, Maurits?
So we get there in 3 ways. One, today we see 1 billion obese people in the world today, based on the latest data from Imperial. That's estimated to go to 2 billion people by 2030. 2, people think about weight loss drugs today just in the context of weight loss. But if you think about GLP-1 as a drug that could also address other disorders, whether it's neurological disorders, oncological disorders, or even a cardiovascular disorders like heart disease, then actually you see a much bigger TAM. So simplistically, if we just think about, let's say that's just 1 billion people. Let's say that 20% of people by 2030 are on a drug. Today, that's 2%. So that's 10x the penetration from today. And let's say that pricing drops by 60%, below $5,000 a year. Based on those numbers alone, we get to about a $500 billion plus market. So we think this is a market which is only going to grow. So far, estimates basically are doubled every 3 to 6 months. And we may be early, but we think this is a $500 billion opportunity by 2030, unless we see something change in 1, regulation, 2, something in prevalence, or 3, we see that there's a better drug that looks beyond GLP-1, which we don't see today.
There was a really interesting report out from Charles River Labs, which is a drug development company, which basically said sales are not going to expand this year. It's seeing a big drop in drug development interest from pharma companies. One of the reasons it blames was the Inflation Reduction Act and sort of Medicare negotiations. Yeah. How is that going to affect, if at all, the GLP-1 universe?
So price is definitely coming down. Price is already coming down. Novo yesterday said as volumes go up, price will come down. And obviously as reinsurance and reimbursement increases, actually the net back to manufacturers will further decrease. But given the scale of the challenge, where we have 1 billion obese people in the world today, Novo Nordisk yesterday estimated that only 2% are being treated. That shows you just how big the market TAM is in terms of volume. So even
if it's a volume game, not a price game.
It's a volume game, not a price game. And ultimately, understandably, the government wants to make these drugs more affordable and also more accessible, which means that pricing has to come down. So we think that pricing will come down. Pricing may come down more than we expect, depending on whether you're looking at insurance covered or non-insurance covered space. But we think that's ultimately, it's a good thing for patients. We think that the demand is so big and frankly is outstripped by supply that we don't see that as a challenge. And thirdly, frankly, that will also allow more people to get access to the drug earlier. The challenge today is supply. If you look at the Novo results yesterday, they weren't bad results, but what they really underscored is that Novo is just struggling to keep up with the demand they're getting for their drugs. And Novo is very focused on making sure that people who start on a sequence of GLP-1 on Wegovy can actually finish it. And the challenge today is that, frankly, if you can start on it, but you can't get supply to continue on it, then frankly, what is the point of starting on in the first place?
Moritz, you mentioned regulation, you mentioned government. We have an election coming here, right? Are you all on your team trying to game out potential impacts, Trump versus Harris administrations on this market?
So I think both sides of the political spectrum believe that affordability should increase, availability should increase. So both sides of the party will advocate for lower pricing. At the same time, I think both sides of the political spectrum also believe that this is a major issue, which obviously affects patient lives, but also has societal implications, societal costs. So our view is that there's going to be a general consensus around how do we improve the access, availability, affordability of these drugs. The question is how much of that will be covered under Medicare. And obviously, Wegovy is, Zepbound is starting to be, but there's still obviously a question on general insurance coverage. So we think that the political will to expand access will increase. The political will to basically drive innovation or to support innovation will increase. The question is, what will be the insurance coverage, and to what extent will that come from Medicare? So we don't really see the upcoming election as a challenge. We actually think this is one of the few areas where both parties are pretty united, not on general drug policy, but specifically on GLP-1 drug policy.
All right, one of the few areas you actually see right and left coming together, maybe.
Correct.
We'll see. Moritz, thank you so much for joining us. That was great.
Thanks for having me.